We begin with breaking news. He was once one of the most notorious gangsters in Chicago. Tonight, President Trump is commuting the federal sentence of Gangster Disciples co-founder Larry Hoover.
President Trump has once again befuddled many of his supporters, and this time he's done it by using his commutation power in order to release from federal prison a man called Larry Hoover. Now, for those of you who are unaware, Larry Hoover is one of the founders and former leaders of the Gangster Disciples gang, and he was serving 6 consecutive life sentences in a federal penitentiary. By the way, Colorado's Supermax federal penitentiary, where the Unabomber is. And by the way, he 100% deserved all of those life sentences, just as he deserved the 200 years of prison that he is now going to serve in the state of Illinois. But we need to talk about why President Trump decided to go in this direction, and honestly, the sickening displays that we've seen from the local news media, because I found a segment that was going to interview the family that was going to react to this commutation, and wouldn't you know it, it's not the family of any of the victims of Larry Hoover, it's Larry Hoover's family, the people who think that even though he may have committed or ordered a bunch of different murders that he was convicted of, he's still an innocent baby angel Aladdin who didn't do nothing wrong, and he deserves to be released from prison, which is just absurd. But unfortunately, the evil orange man has put him one step closer to that, and now we all have to rely on Governor Pritzker holding strong and whatever other Democratic governors get elected in the state of Illinois in order to make sure that this man serves his time in prison. And that's what we're going to talk about today. But before we do, I want to thank everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay.
Legal experts see this as a potential hollow victory. Now, while Hoover may be released from federal prison, he still has a 200-year state sentence, for which a parole board has already denied early release.
So this story exists in the perfect area where it will be ignored by both sides. For the left side of the political spectrum, it's pretty simple. They like when criminals get their sentences commuted. They like when they get pardoned. They like when society says, oh, we've been oh so cruel to this criminal. All he did was order at least 3 different murders that he was convicted of, among a bunch of other heinous crimes. How are we ever going to hold him accountable for that when we should be arresting poverty? And on the right side of the political spectrum, since it's President Trump that did this awful thing, people are going to ignore it because they don't want to be firing upon their own side. But we don't play that nonsense on this channel. Just as I made a video about Biden commuting the sentence of Adrian Peeler, a man who was in federal prison for, I believe, drug-related charges. However, he was actually the reason why the state of Connecticut started a witness protection program, because Adrian Peeler killed an 8-year-old witness to a case against his brother and his mother. I called that out, and I'm going to call this out as well. And the thing is, this case was brought to President Trump's attention seemingly back in 2018 by Kanye West, who of course was running cover, running defense, saying that this man was like a civil rights hero. He didn't do nothing wrong. Innocent baby angel Aladdin, of course, when in reality, nothing could be further from the truth. And now it's all down to the state of Illinois. Now it's all down to their woke court system and, of course, Governor J.B. Pritzker. And that is not a situation we should be in, but unfortunately, we are in that situation because President Trump commuted this monster sentence. So let us get into how this happened, what this person did, and the absolutely disgusting media coverage that we're seeing related to this. So according to the Daily Beast, President Trump appears to have first heard of gang kingpin Larry Hoover during that 2018 press event with rapper Kanye West, also known as Ye, which has been called one of the craziest Oval Office performances of all time. During that conversation, Kanye West said the following, quote, "He has 6 life sentences. They have him next to the Unabomber doing 23 and 1, West said, meaning that he only gets 1 hour out of his cell a day. What did he do? President Trump asked. Tell me, tell us. And of course, one of Hoover's attorneys, Justin Moore, was present at this time. Quote, allegedly, it's for conspiracy from prison to state prison, Moore said. Quote, you know it's alleged, but we do believe even if he did commit those crimes, the sentence was overly broad and too strict. What's the sentence? President Trump asked. 6 consecutive life sentences in the most secure prison in the world, also known as a clean version of hell, for basically an economic crime. So yeah, that was the pitch back in 2018, and if you guys will remember, the reason Kanye West was brought into the White House is because President Trump was trying to appeal to black voters, but of course, he was using the left's ideology in order to do so by appealing on soft on crime grounds. And of course, they end up downplaying his crimes. First of all, they say it's alleged. The man was convicted. He was convicted by a jury of his peers and sentenced to 6 life sentences. That is not alleged. That is proven out in court beyond a reasonable doubt. And then he basically says, oh, this is kind of like an economic crime, a paperwork issue, which again, fast forward a couple of years and President Trump might be thinking, or might have been told, that's very similar to what Letitia James ended up going after you for, or what Alvin Bragg did, and that's just not fair to do. But the reality couldn't be further from the truth. Now, I've already spoiled that this man was a founder of the Gangster Disciples, a notorious street gang in the city of Chicago. But of course, Kanye West and the attorney for Hoover, nobody representing the prosecution, have a different version of who this man is. A version that, by the way, is being pushed by the local news media post his commutation. Quote, and really, the reason why they imprisoned him is because he started doing positive for the community, West said. Quote, he started showing that he actually had power. Now, of course, the event then took a step toward the nutty, where Kanye West said, quote, there's theories that there's infinite amounts of universe and there's alternate universe. So it's very important for me to get Hoover out because in an alternate universe, I am him. Quote, and I have to go get him free because he was doing positive inside Chicago, just like how I'm moving back to Chicago. And it's not just about, you know, getting on a stage and being an entertainer. So yeah, again, according to Kanye West, at the time, the real reason why Hoover was sent to prison for all of these sentences at the state level and at the federal level is because he was doing good for the community, which, by the way, is something that is backed up by this propaganda from the local news affiliates, which shows interviews of Hoover where he's talking about how he already served his time and he's just trying to do good because everybody that he's talking about in these gang wars, they're all black and they need to unify based on that racial identity.
In 1993, Hoover spoke to former CBS News Chicago reporter John Davis, and at that time, Hoover was 42 years old and had already served 20 years in prison.
I've done my time. I paid my debt to society.
That was Larry Hoover, more than 3 decades ago. At that time, the leader of the Gangster Disciples and convicted murderer told our John Davis he had a lot of time to think about ways to stop the gang violence on the streets of Chicago.
One teenager don't like the other teenager because of the way he wears his hat, because his ideology is different from his. A disciple don't like a vice lord. We all black people. It's no different.
Now, another local news media outlet took it a step further. Like I told you in the open, I thought they were going to interview the victims' families, but instead they interviewed Hoover's family, and they are starting to apply pressure on Governor J.B. Pritzker in order to get this man out on the statewide charges, because honestly, it's just so unfair that this person has to serve the time for the crimes that he 100% committed, even though Hoover's attorney is saying they're alleged crimes, as if we don't have overwhelming proof of his guilt.
And he deserves redemption. He deserves a second chance at being a part of this community. And he could be a benefit to this community if they want him to be a benefit to this community.
As years passed, Hoover's case drew increasing attention, including from artists like Kanye West and Chance the Rapper.
And I got to remind y'all that he was a political prisoner.
He is being held because he is a symbol, not because he needs further incarceration or he hasn't been rehabilitated.
The president's commutation only applies to Hoover's federal sentence. He still faces state prison time for which he's eligible for parole. Governor J.B. Pritzker can also offer clemency.
We know that Governor Pritzker believes in rehabilitation, redemption, and transformation, and he's done all of that.
Again, where's the other side of this? Where's the prosecution's case? This reeks of innocence fraud nonsense where we just hear the defense talking points while at the same time they pretend like the prosecution had no case at all whatsoever. But I think it's about damn time that we start looking into what Hoover was actually convicted of, because you will not be shocked to find out that it's absolutely horrific. And by the way, we're just going to set aside right now all the gang related stuff. We're going to set aside the drug charges and all all of that because he definitely did that. That's definitely incorporated into his sentence. Make no mistake about that. And we're going to focus on the murder. So at a meeting of his gang, Hoover ordered the execution of William Young and other street-level workers suspected of stealing from Hoover's narcotics stash, court papers say. On the night of February 26, 1973, Andrew Howard, a gang member under Hoover's command, shot Young in the head 6 times and dumped his body in the alley. Approximately 90 minutes after the murder, Hoover called another meeting of his gang and reported that he had gotten one of the guys that they was after and he wanted the other 2 killed before the week was out. Close quote. One of the 2, Tony Tucker, vanished and has not been seen since. The third, Joshua Shaw, was shot 6 times in the head and upper torso, but managed to survive. During an interview with police officers, Mr. Joshua Shaw said that he was shot on the orders of inmate Larry Hoover, court papers say. Just before the murder trials of Larry Hoover and Mr. Andrew Howard, Mr. Josh Shaw was found dead in an alley with 2 gunshot wounds to the back of his head. Now look, technically, since we never found the body of the third person, we can't actually prove for a fact that he was murdered, but we have 2 of the 3 individuals that was proven out in court that Hoover ordered the execution of that were ultimately dead, and 1 vanished to never be seen again. One of the survivors, who survived 6 shots, including shots to the dome and to the torso, was later shot in the back of the head twice, execution style, and these local news reports are playing video of this man talking about how black people need to unify and set aside that petty gang nonsense. Well, he didn't set it aside. He took the lives of 2, probably definitely 3 of these people in order to secure his own position because of these people allegedly, he heard a rumor, stole from his drug collection. Now, Hoover was sentenced to 200 years on the state level for that double murder, but quote, astonishingly, he continued to rule the gangster disciples from prison, court papers report. Under Hoover's leadership, the gang rose to prominence, controlling a large part of the street-level drug trafficking in the Chicago area. At its height, in the early 1990s, the gang's drug sales brought in about $100 million per year. In the 1980s, Hoover decided to go from monarchical to corporate. The king became the chairman with 2 boards of directors. Quote, an incarcerated board for the leaders in prison and an unincarcerated board for the leaders on the outside, court papers note. Now, under this arrangement, each of the members of this board of directors on the inside and the outside had about 1,000 gangster disciples under their control, under their rule at any given time, and it was proven out in court that Hoover was using his 1,000 disciples in order to go after people, commit more crimes, and this is why he was moved from regular ordinary prison to the Colorado Supermax, because he was running this criminal empire from behind bars.
Hoover co-founded the Chicago Gangster Disciples, and while behind bars for a 1973 murder, federal prosecutors say he continued to run the gang's prolific multi-state drug operations.
If Larry Hoover said there was going to be a killing, there was a killing.
Ron Safer was the lead federal prosecutor who secured Hoover's 1997 conviction for running a criminal enterprise behind bars.
I believe in redemption, but there are some crimes that are so horrific that they deserve the punishment to the full extent of the law.
Now, the gangster disciples didn't have enough people in order to manage all the territory that they acquired, so what they ultimately ended up doing, and by the way, this is what the attorney refers to as the just a financial crime, was charging other gangs a fee in order for them to operate in their territory, effectively extending the reach of the gangster disciples beyond any rival that could possibly compete with them. And of course, those kickbacks ended up going back to Hoover, who was one of the once sole leaders of the gang, but now was one of these leaders on this board of directors. Now, also, in addition to that, he would send orders down in order to punish people for violations, and those punishments could include beatings, but also homicides. Now, in order to conceal the illegal activities of the gangs, members were forbidden from discussing the same with law enforcement authorities under penalty of death, according to the court papers. In 1993, Hoover moved further to fill his pockets as chairman by instituting what is called a 1 day of week nation dope, which basically means that everybody who is selling drugs in his territory for that 1 day a week had to kick back all of the money to him, which would net him $200,000 to $300,000 per week. Now, he thought people might resist that, but he instructed people to tell their subordinates that refusing to sell nation dope would lead to them being shot, essentially saying, look, it's 1 day out of the week versus your life. Now, there are hours upon hours of recordings of his calls, his electronic communications and otherwise, that show that Hoover was engaged in running his criminal enterprise from behind bars, which is why he was convicted on those federal counts. But more importantly, this is why he had such heavy restrictions and was moved to that Colorado Supermax, where he could be monitored more closely, essentially cutting him off, cutting the head of the snake off the gang, the Gangster Disciples, which again, he was ruling with an iron fist. So even if the governor of Illinois doesn't break on this issue, and the next governor doesn't break on this issue, and so on, even though I don't think you can trust that many Democrats as this person gets older, they now have to move him back to the Chicago prisons, the very same ones that weren't able to stop him from running this criminal enterprise in the first place, or as Hoover's attorney said, just a basic alleged financial crime that was really no big deal at all. Again, absolutely embarrassing. The way that the local news media covers this is shameful, but this is where we're at right now because President Trump still has a lot of bad people around him from his first term that ended up serving up this pardon or actually commutation on a silver platter, and it's ridiculous. Now, I'll link the sources in the description of this video for you to check them out, but of course, I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. As per usual, if you like this video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on the social medias, support me via support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about President Trump commuting the sentence of an absolute monster. Till next time.